That's what we're also facing in terms of climate. If we go into panic mode, into that fragmented state of overwhelm and trauma reflex, which is understandable. I mean, shit's happening out there and it's
Right.
scary as hell, right? It's scary what's happening. But the adult can say, I need help. I need support. Whereas those child states just go, how do I hunker down and get even smaller?
Yeah.
How can it, maybe it'll bypass me this time, you know? So
Mm.
there's ways that those child states really are about shrinking into invisibility and getting very, very still. Whereas the adult can say, I'm scared, I'm sad, my heart is breaking, I need support, or I'm here to offer support.
Welcome to Climate Changed, a podcast from the BTS Center. I'm Autumn Brown, artist, theologian, mother, and freedom worker. Here, we ask you and our guests what it means to live, to love, and to lead in a climate-changed world.
And I'm Nicole Dieroff, Associate Director at the BTS Center. In this season of Climate Changed, we are exploring world building. How do we nurture cultures, practices, and spiritual communities that can hold us in the long dark and help us imagine the futures we long for?
In today's episode, I'm in conversation with psychotherapist and author Francis Weller. Francis has spent decades tending grief, ritual, and soul work in community. In our conversation, he talks about what he calls the long dark, the generations-long passage we are living through, and what it asks of our imaginations, our rituals, and our spiritual leadership.
We'll be listening for how grief, community, and friendship become forms of climate chaplaincy in these times, ways of showing up spiritually and emotionally for one another in a climate-changed world.
Before we get into the conversation, I'm going to share a short speculative story that I wrote in Ireland this summer as a part of the visionary fiction writing workshop that I teach there every year. This story, that workshop really, is my favorite thing I get to do. This piece is located in a future world that I, my co-teacher, and the workshop participants created together. In this future world, the earth sings to children, but only some of them.
As you listen, we invite you to think of this story as a doorway, a moment to wander a bit, to wonder a bit, and to let your mind stretch in the direction of hope.
Okay, here's the story. It's called Island. I grew up on an island. Mainly what I remember is how everything was repurposed in our small school that overlooked the Strand. The building echoed, whether it was empty or not, because the walls were thin and made with metals. I always felt cold, even in the late spring. I couldn't wait to be outside when I was inside when I was outside. I was restless, wanted to be anywhere else, even though the mantra in those days was that the soil was our home. Imagine a land full of dead, crying out to be loved well, and a small, intrepid group of survivors with nothing but a book and a promise, settling the land and calling it reclamation. My take is that we are migrators trying to be landed gentry, always. It's our lot. Perhaps it is because I could never hear them above a whisper, and they didn't speak to me in words but in pictures. And my left hand being curled and hard to use, I was always trying to hide from people, never wanting to be special. I didn't want to stand out, so I didn't. But not being thought of had its own dangers. In any case, I didn't mate and didn't want to. After the humming stopped, I was supposed to grow in that way of wanting. But it was more like the ocean inside of me stood still. I just got quieter and quieter, working the land with one good hand, watching, noticing. It didn't feel unbearable exactly. It just felt like nothing might ever happen to me ever again.
Thank you, Autumn, for sharing that story with us.
In many ways, the world of this story is not so far from our own. We're living through a time when the ground is shifting beneath our feet, when the pace of change can feel unbearable, and many of us are wondering how to stay present to grief without losing our capacity to imagine.
We invite you, our listeners, to carry any of the images or feelings that arose from Autumn's story about land, belonging, and longing into the conversation you're about to hear. In this episode, Autumn, you're in conversation with Francis Weller, a psychotherapist, writer, and soul activist whose work has introduced the healing power of grief ritual to thousands of people. He is the author of The Wild Edge of Sorrow, The Threshold Between Loss and Revelation, and In the Absence of the Ordinary, a book I am reading right now and highly recommend.
Through his organization, Wisdom Bridge, and decades of soul-centered therapy and teaching, Francis weaves psychology, myth, ritual, and indigenous wisdom to help communities face sorrow, deepen imagination, and remember what it means to be held in the primal matrix of communal care. With that, we're going to move into my conversation with Francis Weller about the long, dark, about grief and imagination as twins, and about the kinds of ritual and spiritual leadership that can sustain us in a climate-changed world. Wow. Welcome to the show, Francis Weller. Wow, what an honor to be speaking with you again.
Well, this is going to be a wonderful habit that we're going to fall into, I think.
I think so.
Mm.
I'm truly so delighted to get to speak to you in the context of this podcast. I want listeners to know that I've been in conversation with Francis before. I've gotten to be a recipient of some of this wisdom, and I'm so excited for our listeners to be able to receive your wisdom as well. Just want to jump right in with a question that I think our listeners will resonate with. In your work, both in your published written work and also in the conversations that I've heard you have with others, you've referred to the time period that we're in as the long dark, which is such a evocative, evocative phrase. I'm curious to know where that language came from inside of you.
Mm.
Also, I'm curious to know how you sense the darkness idea.
I like starting off light, so thank you.
I got to keep it on the surface, at least for the beginning of the conversation.
We'll just skim through this part here. The long dark, I mean, there's many names for this time, right? The polycrisis, the great turning. There's lots of different ways that we can think about the time that we're in. This term kind of emerged, I think, again, up out of the ground, out of soul, to say, let's find language that evokes imagination. Let's find language that invites a different mode other than just analytical. But how does it feel? When, like you said, the word is evocative.
Yes.
When you hear long dark, you don't know how to quite get a hold of that. So it invites a different mode of perception. How do I engage this? And I think it does evoke imagination. It evokes a type of silent receptivity to a deep quality of listening that happens in the darkness. Both words are meaningful. Long, meaning this is not going to be to the end of this administration's term. It's not going to be a few years in length. We're talking generations. We're talking at least 2 generations before we might see something coalesce on the far end of repair and restoration, if we make it. So the long gives us a sense that, I won't see the end of this. You might. I'm not going to see the end of the long dark. But that also means there's much work for me to do right now in terms of putting seed in the ground. What can I do that might germinate in the darkness, right? I mean, that's why I love the second part of that phrase, the long dark. Our perception of dark is really so pejorative, so negative.
Mm-hmm.
We need to reclaim this word and redeem this word to remember the holiness that dwells in the darkness. So I'm sitting here in my cabin in Northern California looking out at redwoods and bays and Doug fir. I see them because of what's happening in the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I'm seeing is a manifestation of what's happening below the ground, in the dark. The microbes, the mycelia, the minerals, the root exchange, the mutual support that happens in the darkness. So the invitation, again, is for us to slow it down enough to begin to see what the teaching is in the darkness. There's a wonderful phrase by Susan Murphy, an Australian Zen teacher. She said, we must develop the capacity to see with the dark adapted eye.
Ooh.
No, so we can see in the darkness. We like things brightly lit, 24/7. It's as if our relationship to darkness is one of great suspicion and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
We want to keep it lit all the time. But at night, we enter the dreaming world. We enter the world where image dominates and gives us a different way of engaging our own personal psychic lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same space we're being invited into now. The darkness invites dreaming. It invites stillness. It invites quiet. It invites patience, and it invites restraint. We typically want to do something about the problem, right? This crisis we're in right now. Let's do something. Well, yeah, I'm not saying don't take actions. There's certainly things we can do to mitigate. But I think the return to a different relationship to the ground, to the earth, will require a different kind of listening, a different kind of not doing, of not knowing. In the old language, we are on what we call the via negativa, the road of not doing, the road of restraint, of
Mm.
holding back and waiting. I believe I shared with you and Adrian this term from the Inuit tradition, kartsuluni.
Mhm.
And just for the listeners now, kartsuluni translates quite literally sitting quietly together in the darkness, waiting expectantly for something creative to burst forth. And these were the whaling people, and they couldn't go out to hunt until the whale people gave them a song that says that they are in mutual and reciprocal relationship with one another, that the whale people would be offering a gift of one of their bodies for the sustenance of the community. But that took them sitting quietly in the dark, waiting. This is not a white Western tradition. We don't wait. We march forward. We plunge into it.
We discover.
We discover, and then we claim, right? So the mode here is very different. I think the long dark is inviting a different kind of gestational space.
I appreciate that you named gestation specifically because as you were talking, I was thinking about the darkness of womb with my first pregnancy in particular. I remember having this thought at a certain point, wow, it's such a good thing that my brain is not in charge of what's happening right now. It's so incredible to me to know that my body and my womb is taking care of this process that is very mysterious to me that is resulting in a new life forming. It's like the thing that's happening inside of me is exactly what all of our creation myths are about. It's something is being created out of other parts, right?
Right, right,
But my mind has nothing to do with it, or my thinking has nothing to do with it. And I can't see it. Or the inability of my thinking mind to view what is happening is a part of its success. It makes me think about the dark adapted eye, or it's almost this like tuning a different capacity or a different type of sight that has very little to do with our thinking and planning.
right. Yeah, we think about what imagination is. Again, one of those things that we are somewhat pejorative about. But we don't imagine, we are imagined. Imagination is something that we allow, that we attune ourselves to. It's like dreaming at night. I don't go to bed thinking, well, I'm going to dream about playing baseball. The dream happens, and I'm not the dreamer. I'm in the dream. I'm
Mhm.
witnessing the dream. I'm participating in the dream, along with all these other beings and creatures and situations and circumstances. My job is to be in good relationship to those images, but they're not mine. And we
Hmm.
colonize everything. We even colonize dreams. What can I get from it? Rather than asking, what does it want from me? What is the
Hmm.
dream inviting me to pay attention to tend to care for, to mend, whatever it is? So the same thing I think with this long dark is that we're not going to think our way through, just like you didn't think your way through your pregnancy.
Mhm.
There's a term in my friend Malidoma Some's village, Ilbangura, and the word translates the things that knowledge cannot eat. Isn't that beautiful?
I
You know?
love that. The things that knowledge cannot eat.
Yeah, we're not going to think our way through the long dark. It's going to
Hmm.
require a different quality of perception so that we are impressed upon by images, by story, by myth, by ritual. What do we need to do right now? What do we need to do to repair relationships between people and place, between watersheds, and all of the
Mm.
ways in which the repair needs to happen? We need to be shown that. In the old ways, you would say that the earth is the dreaming body. It's the body that gives us the rituals. It's the body that gives us the songs that are needed right now. And we're so out of touch with that we're now even getting further away with AI and different things that abstract the intimacy,
Mm.
but they don't deepen the intimacy with place and land. I know this land. I know when things ripen. I know when birds return. I know when the crickets start singing. I know when the berries are ripe. I know when the grosbeaks are going to return in the spring, oftentimes by weeks. I can tell because I'm also not just married to my wife, but I'm also married to this place,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you have already named imagination and how closely your work has hewed to the relationship between grief and imagination. I've heard you say that grief and imagination are twins, that they deepen one another. And then I'm thinking about the wisdom you just named, that the earth is the dreaming body, that what we need is actually coming forth from the earth. We grow our capacity to receive the thing that is coming forth from the earth. Well, I'm curious if you can talk about the relationship you see between the imaginativeness or the creativity that emerges from communities that are able to actually make space for grief ritual or collective practices of acknowledging sorrow. Like, how do you see that showing up in community life?
What comes to mind was 9/11.
Hmm.
My son had just moved to New York City 2 weeks before 9/11. So he was right across the bay from and seeing it all, happening. A couple of weeks later, we went out to see him, to be with him. It was partly scheduled as a parents' weekend with the kids, at the new school at the university. And he and I took a subway as close as we could get to ground zero.
Mhm.
And the moment you got off the train, what I saw was I was in the midst of profound ritual ground. Everywhere there were shrines, there were people in circles, some silent, some singing, some weeping. It's as if instinctively we knew what we had to do. The psyche there's almost like a call and response between loss and sorrow. And when that response is being allowed, this is what we know to do. We know to circle, we know to grieve, we know to hold each other, we know to make shrines and altars and places of beauty. We know how to do this. Carl Jung once said that we all possess what he called the unforgotten wisdom that resides at the core of the psyche. Now, this unforgotten wisdom remembers how to do this. It remembers how to gather and remembers how to respond to circumstances that all human beings will face. None of us will not know loss, right? We will all encounter loss. What we don't know is how to contain that loss, how to work with that loss, particularly communally, because the life sentence most of us have been given is individualism. Carry it alone, carry it privately.
Mhm.
And that's been the heart of my work for the past, I don't know, 4 decades, has been to try to reanimate what I call the primal matrix. That the original matrix that we made as human beings for 300,000 years has always been communal.
Hmm.
We never responded to this individually. We responded to it in the context of community. Even if I was the one having the loss, if my partner or a child or somebody died, the community was the ground into which I fell. Right now, you're basically told, buck up, get on with
You
it.
get 3 days off.
3 days, man. You should be fine by then, right? Get back to work because productivity and the machinery of capitalism are relentless. And the inhospitality to soul and to sorrow is so egregious that, we're, as you just said, we've barely given any time at all to register the losses in our lives.
When you say that your work is to reanimate the primal matrix, can you just slow that down a little bit for the listener who's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, thank you. I can get ahead of myself there. Sometime in the mid-1990s, I was doing a training with my friend Malidoma Some and his wife, Walfo at the time, and I remember writing him a letter because all this grief was coming up. This tremendous grief was coming up during this training, and I wrote him saying, "I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I'm so sad." And then he invited me to come down. We spent the day down at his home in Oakland, and what I got in touch with was that I was inside of what it is my soul expected. I was inside Village, and it was bringing up both the satisfaction of being inside Village, but also the grief that I was not living in Village.
Hmm.
That the grief later became the fourth gate of grief, what we expected and did not receive. We expected this. We didn't expect to be facing life in solitary confinement.
Yes.
We didn't expect to be dealing with loss and grief and failure and defeat and pain and suffering all by ourselves. Or at best, you go to somebody and you go to private practice. You go to see a therapist. Now, bless you for coming to see me over the past 43 years. I appreciate it. At the same time, I say to almost every one of those people who come to see me, this is a good place to start. It's a good place to learn how to tolerate contact with uncomfortable material, but also to be seen by another human being.
Mhm.
But I say, but ultimately, you'll need a much larger holding space because the psyche anticipated many others surrounding you in times of suffering. And that's what I've seen over and over again, that the matrix, the primal matrix, was the original context in which the encounters with loss, death, grief, suffering were held.
Mm.
They were never held privately. So the original matrix was the fact that we as human beings knew to circle when there was trouble, or when
Mhm.
there's gratitude, or when there's initiation, or when there's, celebrations of transitions, marriages, or whatever. We knew to gather.
Mhm.
Only very recently, the last several hundred years, has individualism kind of crept in and overtaken that matrix. But when we gather in those circles, the psyche goes, yeah, this is what I expected.
Mhm.
Many times at the end of a grief ritual, somebody will say something like, I've never done anything like that before in my life, but it felt oddly familiar.
Huh.
Now, what is that oddly familiar? There's Jung's unforgotten wisdom. The
Mhm.
psyche, the archaic psyche, the old psyche recognizes that cadence, that rhythm. It's been searching for that rhythm. I was just at the cancer help program this past week. You begin to feel when the rhythm is established. Like there's one person there who was holding on so tightly because she was operating under the education, the conditioning that there's nobody there for her. So she has to hold it all herself. And when I do grief work, I often say that there's two roles. There's containment and there's release. And you can't do both. You can't do both jobs. And if there's no containment, you become the permanent containment field and you end up recycling grief your entire lifetime. And you never get the chance to set it down.
Like within yourself.
Yes, you begin to recycle, not just your own grief, but generations of grief, ancestral grief, cultural grief. Everything circulates, but has no place to be set down. So this woman, once she was inside the containment field, began to cry and cry and cry. She said, I haven't cried for years. Well, she's had no containment for years. She's had to do it herself. And you can't, again, do both jobs. You can't both contain and release. So once the containment was built, that original matrix, that primal matrix, she could then do the job she had to do, which was to grieve, was to
Mhm.
weep. And she left looking different and breathing differently because she got contained for a while. So that's the original matrix I'm talking about, is that human beings we absolutely require holding spaces to process anger, rage, sorrow, defeat, shame. Those all require ritual ground, and we don't have it. So we end up, again, carrying these, wheelbarrowfuls of stuff that should be set down. But
Mhm.
we're weighed down by so much material because of the absence of that primal matrix. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay.
It's really interesting. So this connects really directly to one of the questions I wanted to ask you about the work of ritual or building the ritual ground. I'm thinking about the listener who is a clergy person. All clergy who are trained in their particular faith traditions are inheritors of rituals, of particular rituals that they are trained to lead in community. So many of the people who listen to this show, they're primed for ritual. They're familiar with ritual, but I imagine, I can't know, but I imagine that folks who are listening to this show, just like many people on earth right now, feel that sort of awareness that there's a different ritual ground that is needed at this time than some of the things that we've inherited. I'm thinking about, you named it as the call and response between loss and sorrow, and that call and response naturally arises inside of us. And there's a way that we know what to do. And I certainly have experienced this in my own life, the improvisatory ritual that occurs because I'm in touch,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm so in contact with my grief that it doesn't feel that there's anything else that would even take place aside from the thing that's unfolding. And I wonder about our listeners who are in spiritual leadership. What advice would you have for them? How do they get out of the way of performed ritual and actually attune to maybe perhaps the ritual that is needed for their community and build trust. How do you, as a spiritual leader, build trust with yourself to let something that is maybe more spontaneous unfold, coming from within community rather than the inherited? Do you hear what I'm getting at?
But yeah, I think it's a very critical question. I think it's a very critical question because what we want from ritual is the possibility of derangement. We
Mhm.
want to be knocked out of the current arrangement. And the arrangement that most of us have been given is be in control, behave, look good, look like you got it together. Don't fall apart. Ritual is the invitation to fall apart. Ritual is the invitation to be shaken out of the current circumstance and realigned. You don't want to come out of ritual the same as you went in. Being raised Catholic, I didn't typically come out of Mass changed. There was a beautiful social structure. We came to Mass, we said, the sign of peace. We saw people we knew and we reinforced community, but we didn't do the vertical dimension, which was to connect spirit and soul, to have that linkage stirred, animated, activated, because that's where the realignment occurs in those territories of soul and spirit. That's the hard thing because I think instinctively, in a culture that has failed to really reinforce belonging, we're very anxious about how we appear. So there's a strong dictate around staying
Mm.
in control. So ritual is actually kind of scary. We do ritual light. We do things that kind of get close to the edge of it, but we still come away from funerals apologizing for crying, at least in white churches, You know, I'm sorry I lost control, Oh my God, this is a funeral for fuck's sake.
If not now.
Yeah, right, right. What more do we need to be able to get on our hands and knees and just howl, But that is so prohibited, so against the rules. We want to belong. We want to be approved of, so we don't typically go into those spaces. So your question is so important. How do we warm up the space? Because ritual, like grieving, require heat, intensity, and community. Those are the elements we need to generate.
Heat, intensity, and community.
Yeah.
Okay, break it down, Francis.
We call it composting. Most of the people arriving on Friday afternoon uh, are very tight, just like that woman I was mentioning at the cancer help program, very, very tight. And it takes time and singing and movement and dance and writing and sharing and softening the ground. We typically show up and we have an event and it's too fast. To get to these spaces you're talking about, Autumn, requires the elements of time, slowing down, coming back into a soul rhythm, into a communal rhythm that is, conducive to revelation, to being able to share this is who I am right now. But speed has the exact opposite effect. It tightens us up. So I love doing 3-day gatherings because that's how long it really takes for us to come back into what I call geologic speed, to slow down to the rhythm of soul. And then after the second day, that's when we go into ritual itself, the primary ritual of grieving together. Because by then, the loosening has happened, the softening, the warming has happened, so the heat is beginning to build. You're building heat all weekend to get to that place where there's enough heat and enough intensity. The community has been built over the course of the 3 days. Now we can go. Now we can enter that space. That takes a lot. Patience and slow cultivation of the ground.
I'm really tuning in right to what you just said about speed tightens us up.
Mm-hmm.
What is the overriding feeling that everyone has right now? It's that everything is moving too fast. It's curious because our modern, very individualistic culture is so ahistorical, but people really feel the speed at which the climate is changing, happening so much faster than can be accounted for, even though it's been warned about for over 100 years. It's like from the Industrial Revolution to now, people have been saying this is where it's going, and yet it feels too fast. So I'm putting that all in context too, the need for us to be able to move more slowly in order to warm it up and then attune to one another, attunement that's needed in order to actually process and go through the ritual together.
Uh-huh.
And juxtaposing that with the ways that folks feel like bobsledding over here. you know, the
Right?
it's all going too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the feeling of acceleration is undeniable.
Mhm.
My friend Bayo Akamaloff, he has that Nigerian phrase, "The times are urgent, we must slow down." We can't just match speed with more speed. That the soul doesn't tolerate that. It actually has a phobia, I think, to mania, to moving so fast, so quickly. When you think about connection and friendship and intimacy, those are modes that require slowness, don't they? We want to take our time. We want to linger in those spaces. We want to hold them and just immerse ourselves in those spaces. Well, that's the speed we need right now, because that's the speed that's receptive to imagination. It's like skiing, water skiing. Speed is fine for staying on the surface of things, but if you want to drop, you have to slow down. And this is the season of dropping. The long dark is characterized by descent, by moving downward into darkness, into that underworld territory. And that's why we have to become, again, more skillful at being able to see with that dark adapted eye, to see by means of darkness, not by means of light, trying to take in the ideology of light into the darkness. No, we have to actually be informed by the dark itself. It has much to teach us about patience, about going slow, about reciprocity and reciprocal relationship. I think individualism really collapses in the dark because we need each other.
Right. We have to have something to hold on to.
That's right. That's right.
I'm feeling into this image of feeling our way through the dark, the fact that we have to hold on to one another. We're in this period, the climate changing period, where some of the things that we expect as mammals on Earth are also changing. Now, we might not be incredibly in touch with what is changing. It depends on how close to Earth we're living, right? You are living in an environment. I used to live in the woods as well. So, when you live in an environment where you're really in touch and noticing of Earth, you really do
Mhm.
notice the difference. We're called to slow down. We're being called to attune to what's happening. I'm curious to know how you navigate that in the ritual work that you do, helping people attune and notice, and then also helping them orient to what's different.
The biggest thing that we tried to do is help promote an adult presence.
Hmm.
What you're talking about, in a sense, carries the energies of trauma. When systems change and collapse and fail, it's very akin to experiences of trauma. We go into dissociation, freezing, numbness. We do all kinds of things to survive. And that collectively, we're doing a lot of those things right now.
Mm-hmm.
And those are not to be judged. Thank God we have those capacities, but they're also, in a sense, young capacities.
The capacities of dissociation,
Yes,
hypervigilance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
those are more like adolescent or child strategies, and thank God, again, we have them. So what for me has been most important is how do we help support an adult presence? Because then when we fall into those strategies, we collapse our field of skill down to survival strategies. How do I endure? How do I make it through this? Thank God, again, no judgment. But what we need now are these amplified skills of community, of reconciliation, of repair, of imagination, of ritual eldership. We need all different kinds of medicines right now. And when we're just dealing with survival, those medicines don't typically come out. So a lot of my work has been, how do I foster adult presence? How do we come more into that wider and more encompassing skill set of the adult? That's really the work of separation. How do I separate from the wounded part of me, the strategic part of me? Not because I don't want to be with them, but actually by separating, I actually can now hold them adequately. I can actually care for them adequately rather than letting them drive the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good idea.
Not a good
Uh,
idea.
Not a good idea. So how do
Put
I, how
that
do
child in a car seat.
I, amen, amen. That's right. How do we get the adult back in the driver's seat?
And you're really talking about a different form of child. Like, child of God is like the capacity for wonder in the face of that which we cannot name. The surrender into trust that there's something surrounding us, maybe all that we expected but did not receive, is what we are surrendering into. when we're in the state of, I am a child of God,
Right.
that this is what you're describing as like the wounded child, the part of us that has felt abandoned and alone and left to fend for itself.
Right. 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 So
Hmm.
that's what we're also facing in terms of climate. If we go into panic mode, into that fragmented state of overwhelm and trauma reflex, which is understandable. I mean, shit's happening out there and it's
Right.
scary as hell, right? It's scary what's happening. But the adult can say, I need help. I need support. Whereas those child states just go, how do I hunker down and get even smaller?
Yeah.
How can I, maybe they'll bypass me this time, you know?
Mm.
There's ways that those child states really are about shrinking into invisibility and getting very, very still. Whereas the adult can say, I'm scared, I'm sad, my heart is breaking, I need support, or I'm here to offer support. This is really a critical piece that we don't talk about much. Part of that ground story is I'm all alone and shit's gonna happen and I better have myself, fully aware, cognizant of all moves around me and know where the exit door is. So I wish we would talk more about this, particularly in, activist circles and so forth, because frequently we're still responding with very primitive strategies of survival. Again, no judgment. I
No
understand them.
judgment.
I've got them too.
Right.
We've all got these very early on strategies of how do we not get killed.
Yeah. And I often think to myself, thank God my body knows how to dissociate.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of praise for numbness and dissociation, particularly when we're forced to carry so much of this alone.
Hmm.
That's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So there's intelligence in dissociating. There's intelligence in shutting it down. What we're saying is basically there's not enough of me here in order to face this. I need more. I need community. I need friendship. I need ritual. I need the sacred. I need ancestors. I need elders. Then maybe I can touch this material. We're asking people to face material that without any, context for it, no grounding for it, no holding for it. And it's too much.
Hmm.
It's too much.
Hmm. And that's where the responsibility of our spiritual leaders, I think, really comes to the fore. Folks who are holding spiritual leadership roles on earth right now are among the few people who can cultivate the ground for the experience that people are longing for and actually require in order to face this time.
Trouble there is that frequently those same religious leaders, and I've worked with a lot of them, are not getting the support they need. They take on an identity, on a role that basically precludes them from asking for what they need. So they become chronic holders for others, and then they burn out, or they get, it becomes too much over time. They're carrying their congregants' grief, their personal familial grief, cultural grief. They're carrying so much, but they're the ones who are supposed to be holding everybody else.
What has been required of me in order to spiritually mature has been, for lack of a better word, a willingness to divest from the meaning of my own reaction or to not over invest in my own response to something and to have a kind of orienting practice. Is there more that I can take in? Can I take in even just more information? Can
Mhm,
I take in
mhm.
even just more information? Can I find a way to be less in reaction and more in reception? More in reception of what is happening. And now I'm really attuning to, as you're describing, that was a very young place in me that wanted that ease. And my
Yeah,
maturation has been the decision to decenter that, to say, of course you do, honey.
right,
Of
right.
course you do, honey.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking again about this in relationship to a religious leader, as you said, who is constantly holding. I know what my process has been, but I'm curious from your perspective, how do you cultivate that? How do you cultivate the maturation that then makes it possible to orient and hold?
Yeah, well, we need a few more hours for that one, but
You're like, we need a retreat.
yeah, fundamentally, I would say the most important thing is friendship. I don't think there is maturation outside of friendship. We don't even know most of the times that we're in strategy and in survival modes and in the complex. But our friends can notice us change. Our friends can give us reflections and say, what's going on with you today? You're very quiet, or I can't feel you today. And those are precious, precious people in our world that we trust. Like you say, you generated a quality of trust in people because you're able to see into where somebody is. When we're in those states, we don't know we're in those states. Right.
I love that your answer to the last question was friendship. I just so deeply appreciate that, especially as the medicine that our listeners, particularly our listeners who are holding congregant communities, the idea that the medicine that they need is friendship. I feel like it could not be a better message. I love that.
Wendell Berry, that wonderful farmer poet, said it all turns on affection. That's what I think we're being asked to do, is to fall in love again with this dreaming world and with, others. If we can do that, there might be a chance we could slip through this narrow passage and dream into something quite exquisite.
Right.
Let's do that.
That's what I imagine. Some version of us is going to make it through. We just
Yeah.
don't really know what it
Yeah.
looks like, right?
That is the big prayer. Yes.
The big prayer. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful. Wow. Francis, thank you so much. I just absolutely love conversing with you about all of these ideas. You just offered so much wisdom for our listeners, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful.
It was an absolute pleasure to slow down and talk soul with you. We snuck a little spirit in there too.
Yeah, and we did. We popped up and then we went right back down. We did.
Yeah.
We got it
Yeah.
all. We got it all.
We got it all. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Francis. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you for joining us for this soul-stirring conversation with Francis Weller. There is still much to explore, so we are keeping this conversation going. Next week on Climate Changed, you will get to hear my conversation with Autumn as we unpack the profound themes and ideas that Francis raised today. We'll explore grief, imagination, and we'll share some concrete next steps you can take in your own life and community. Make sure you're subscribed to Climate Changed so you don't miss it.
Thank you for listening to Climate Changed, a podcast from the BTS Center. To learn more about our work and find resources connected to this episode, visit thebtscenter.org.
Climate Changed is a podcast from the BTS Center, which is located in beautiful Portland, Maine. Our show is produced by Peterson Toscano. Thank you, Peterson. You can find transcripts, discussion guides, and now full-length video episodes with bonus material on the BTS Center's YouTube page. Explore more about our in-person and online programs at the BTS Center. I would love to see you at an upcoming program.
Stay connected, share this episode, and reach out anytime. Remember, you can email us podcast@thebtscenter.org. We love hearing from you.
And a blessing. As we close this episode, I am putting my hand on my heart, and if you would like to do the same, you are welcome to do so. May you lean into the long dark, knowing that you are not alone. You, climate change listener, are part of a community of friends who care. Together, let us grieve, let us imagine. For it is indeed a blessing to be alive right now.
Amen.
Amen.
In the next episode of Climate Change,
So many birds and bugs can see in a whole spectrum of light that we humans can't see in, including there are some flowers that have like visible runways to the pollen that we normally can't see, but like the bugs and the birds can see these like infrared
oh my God.
lines being like, this is where you want to go. Come here, like big signs. And I wanted to share that moment because your conversation with Francis was talking about seeing in the dark. And so
Yes.
it just came so visibly to mind for me, these flashlights that offer a new way of seeing that other creatures already have.
Yes.